Hello, my name is David. I'm a principal engineer with Dell, and in this video I'll be demonstrating how to configure remote desktop services to use a trusted third-party certificate. Certificates can be used by several components of remote desktop services, including remote desktop web access and remote desktop gateway. You can use self-signed certificates with remote desktop services, but since self-signed certificates are not inherently trusted, clients have to be manually configured to trust them, which just results in a lot of extra work. In this demonstration, I'll be using the same trusted certificate for all remote desktop services, but it is possible to use different certificates for different services, with one specific constraint that I'll address when we get there. To begin, we need to issue a certificate signing request, or CSR. There are several ways to do this, but I'll use IAS Manager as it's fairly intuitive. With the server selected in the left pane, we need to go to Server Certificates, double-click that, and this shows any existing certificates on the server. Right now there's just a self-signed certificate there. So we click on Create Certificate Request in the right pane, and then fill out these fields. The common name should match the certificate subject name, but in this lab environment, the rest of the fields don't really matter, but the fields are required, so I'll add some information. Then click Next, and here we can choose the cryptographic service provider and the bit length. I'll leave those at the default for purposes of this demonstration, and just click Next again. And then I need to specify the file where the certificate request will be stored. It's just going to be a text file, and I'm just going to store it in this cert folder that I created for this purpose. I'll give it a name, and click Finish. And the request has now been created. I'll go check the directory and make sure it's there. If I open the certificate request, you can see that's what it looks like. That's just a standard certificate request. And now at this point, I need to submit the request to the certification authority, or CA. The procedure for doing that differs according to the CA. In this case, I need to copy the contents of the request file into a particular field. Some CAs may have you upload the text file itself. I'm not going to demonstrate the procedure of submitting the request and receiving the certificate since it differs so much. Instead, we'll just skip ahead a bit. The certificate has now been issued, and I've downloaded it into that same folder. It's a .cer file, which is one of the common extensions for certificate files, but I can't use a .cer file with RDS. It requires a .pfx file. If I look at the file itself, we can see information about the certificate and about the CA that issued it. Notably, there's nothing here about the private key because this certificate has not yet been associated with its private key, which was generated when the request was generated. We need to bind it to the private key before we can use it for RDS. And to do that, we go back to IAS Manager and click Complete Certificate Request. Then we choose the certificate file, give it a friendly name, which will be the certificate subject name, and specify a certificate store where it should be stored. Click OK. And we can see now that it shows up in the list of server certificates. And if we look at the properties of the certificate, you see a note down there that says we do have a private key that corresponds to this certificate. So it has been bound to its private key now, and it can be used by RDS, but first we need to export it. And to do that, from this same console, we click Export, give it a file name, and it's going to be, as you can see, a PFX file now. Just going to save it in the same folder. And we have to assign a password to the private key. This is for protection of the key. Click OK there. And if I go back to the folder, you'll now see that there's a PFX file in there. And that is the file that we can import into RDS. To do that, we go to the Remote Desktop Services section of Server Manager and to the Deployment Properties. And in the Deployment Properties window, there's a Certificates section. And at the moment, it's configured to use a self-signed certificate for all 4 of these role services. As I mentioned, you can use a different certificate for each service, but I'm going to use the same one for all 4. And to do that, we select one of the role services and then click the button labeled Select Existing Certificate. Then select Choose a Different Certificate, click the Browse button, and browse to the PFX file. But that, specify the password that we set on that file, and then click the box that says Allow the certificates to be added, and click OK. And then you have to do this same procedure for each role service. You have to click Apply after you've done each one, and then wait a minute for it to apply the certificate. Unfortunately, you can't do all 4 at once. So this part of the procedure gets a little tedious. I will skip ahead just so you don't have to watch me do the same thing 4 times in a row. I do want to note the warning that appears here saying that you should use the same certificate for Remote Desktop Gateway and Remote Desktop Web Access. That's a best practice from Microsoft. And now I've configured all 4 role services to use that certificate. You can see the state shows success for all of them, and that the trust level shows trusted. So we click OK to finalize that. And now we'll test this from a different machine. I'll do a very simple test. I'll launch a web browser and browse to the Remote Desktop Web Access login page. And you can see it comes up without a certificate warning. And if we look at the certificate itself, you can tell that it is the certificate we just configured. The common name matches, the CA name matches, and the issue date and the expiry date match. So this has been how to configure remote desktop services to use a trusted third-party certificate. I hope it's been useful. Once again, my name is David. I'm a principal engineer with Dell, and thank you for watching.